Hello and welcome back to the channel. We are here with another season of the Warrior Nun season 2. It's been a minute, right? It's been a minute. I do feel I've been saying that about a lot of movies and shows. Because season 1 was pre-COVID and a lot of stuff was either delayed or outright cancelled, or plagued with production issues. And I'll get into a few of those that I think may have or may not have had some impact on the overarching themes and character arcs and plot lines and so on in the actual series. But yeah, season 1 was for me a very, very, very fun first season. I know it didn't blow up as much as some other shows, but I do think they managed to give us a somewhat simplistic premise, and I think that was one of the things that I enjoyed most about it. It wasn't too grand, although I suspect we'll eventually get there, to some world-ending threat. But I enjoyed the characters mostly, and that was the more enjoyable thing for me in the very first season. Me, I'm not big on the whole chosen one protagonist, so for me that was the weakest area of season 1. But I was curious going to season 2 to see just how they handled Ava, because at the start usually there's going to be a character arc for the main character, so my feelings on Ava herself, I was hoping would have changed for season 2. So let's get into it. We'll discuss some of the things that I did like about season 2, some things that I thought worked but could have been done better, and then some things that I think didn't work. So let's jump in. All right, so right off the bat, of course, everyone would have noticed that this was a much shorter season than the last. The season was only 8 episodes as opposed to the 10 that we got last season. Now, this comes back to what I mentioned earlier on about some things that may have impacted or been impacted by COVID or plagued with production issues. I'm not sure if it's directly related to that. I don't believe there's been any official reasoning given for the shorter season. But Netflix series do typically stand around 8 to 10 episodes, so I think that's a good place to be at 8 episodes. I do wonder though whether this was an issue rising from COVID, and maybe they had to kind of wrap things up pretty quickly, or whatever the case might be. So yeah, definitely a shorter season, but I don't feel as though it was the season was hurt by it. Not entirely. There were some instances where you do feel as though some things may or may not have been rushed, particularly the first episode. They did do a time skip, which was interesting. Again, not sure if this was a direct result of things that were happening during production, but I'm usually for time skips because I don't typically want to spend too much time getting somewhere, and it may impact the pacing negatively. But I do feel as though I wanted to see how some of these characters got to the point where they were, and it's going to lead into one of the negatives that I have of very few. One of the negatives that I have of this season, but I'll get back to that later. But yes, I did definitely want to see how the characters got from point A to point B, and just dropping us into, I think we started off in Switzerland. I think there was just a missed opportunity there, especially for characters like Camila, who didn't get a lot of screen time the last season. She did get a lot more this season, but I wanted to see how she got from that timid, clumsy character to the strong-willed one that we did get in this season. I thought the time skip was a bit unnecessary, if because it could have been spent showing us how those characters got to that point. We did a lot of world hopping this season, which I did love. I don't know if much of this was done on a green screen or on location. I want to say it was, a lot of it was on location, but I'm not absolutely certain. But I did like that we were going to different locations. Ava was speaking German. How did she do that that quickly? She was in an orphanage. She was in an orphanage for much of her life. I'm not sure. I'm trying to learn German myself, and it's real difficult. But hey, she's motivated me now. She has. So yeah, we did a lot of moving around, and it's one of the things that I always call out in shows is their ability to go to or have different locations and different languages. I'm a sucker for that in particular. And we didn't just have the characters speaking English, they're speaking Italian, German, and I quite like that. I think it gave you the feeling that you were at the location that they were claiming they were. Could have been a green screen, I don't know, but I think that added to the authenticity of it. And it's just great that they added that additional layer to make it feel a bit more authentic. So I did appreciate that. Going into some of the characters that I mentioned, Camila being one and Mother Superion being the other. Last season, these were two standout characters for sure. Mother Superion was probably, outside at the end of last season, outside of Beatrice and probably Mary, and we'll get to Mary later on. But Mother Superion was a standout for me in the last season, and I was hoping that we would get more screen time for her this season, and we did. They did not disappoint. We got a backstory from Mother Superion to see her bearing the halo and, what happened to her, or she got the scar. And it was just an all-round great development for the character. I was pleasantly surprised by it, especially that moment moments, but a particular moment that she does get to with Ava, because back in season 1, of course, she was kind of the hard hitting no nonsense sensei, in training, and she gave everyone a hard time. It wasn't just Ava, but I did feel as though, okay, they were building on a relationship there, and eventually they got there in this season to the point where, when she was passing away, Ava, just broke down, because we forget Ava didn't really have a parental figure for most of her life, and Mother Superior, became that for her. And it goes back to what I said earlier about the time skip and things that I wished I'd gotten to see, and I wanted to see how they grew closer together, and I didn't really get that. I just felt as though we were kind of robbed of that. I still enjoy the moment very much, and of course seeing Mother Superior do her thing. And one thing I will say this season, the choreography, especially Mother Superior's scenes, of course, were just amazing. I love seeing her kick ass. I was torn when the character didn't die. As much as I didn't want her to, I really did not want her to. I want her to be a staple in the series. But I love the moment, with her and Ava. I almost wish that she did pass away so that Ava could have a character arc on her own, and experiencing some loss being the foundation for that. And so I really love the moment when she was passing away. I wouldn't complain when she came back to life, but I do wish she did only for the sake of Ava's growth, because that is one of the things that I think does need to be worked on. Again, I'll touch on that again when I get to some of the things that I thought could have been done better. But yes, Mother Superior, fantastic. One of my favorite characters this season, if not my favorite character this season. I'll try to narrow that down by the time we get to the end of this video. Then there is Camila, the heart of the group, and I absolutely love her this season. I was a bit concerned that we were going to go down the route of she's gonna be manipulated by Adriel and so on, but no, they again surprised me, and that's one of the things I like about the season, is that there were a lot of things that I did not expect to happen that happened. They subverted my expectations in many ways. So while the season did have some weaknesses, I felt it did that quite well. And for Camila, that was definitely a highlight, because her acknowledging that, okay, Adriel has placed some control over me, but it's a two-way connection. I'm going to use that to my advantage. And we saw where, that came in handy. Her as a character, I don't know whether, because at one point when I did suspect that, I felt Mother Superion was going to pass away because we were getting so much screen time. I figured, okay, they're building Camila up to be the new Mother Superion. She can be tough when she needs to be, and the comedic moments that with her this season were just amazing. I don't know the actress, but I need to. I need to. I thought she was really, really good this season. Acting was on point. The humor, she definitely delivered it. She has great comedic timing. And she was definitely a standout. Both her and Mother Superion are, without a doubt, my two favorite things of this season. I'm glad that we got more screen time for them, and hopefully we'll have more to come. All right, Miguel. This was another challenging. This was a challenging character for me because it by the end of it, because initially when the character was introduced, I was a bit concerned that we were going to go down the route of another love triangle, which I didn't love in season 1. Again, if you're not used to the channel, I do not particularly love when the focus is on romantic triangles or relationships. I prefer to just focus on the story. But this is a drama, so there are going to be some dramatic things happening, right? So when he did enter the picture, I was concerned, okay, is this the new boyfriend that's going to be a love triangle between Ava, Beatrice, Miguel? And again, the series surprised me by not going in that direction, and he turned out to be the doctor's son who vanished in the last episode, last season. And that caught me off guard. I was not prepared for that. Oddly, the casting was fantastic, but I didn't pick up on it. That, okay, could this be? I didn't. But when I revealed, it's like, okay, so he went to the other side. Time moves a lot differently there than it does here, and now he's here. And my only gripe, because at the end I didn't particularly like the character. By the end, I liked him, but my only gripe is that towards the end I didn't feel as though they wrapped that up particularly well. I don't think after he died, he just died abruptly, by the way. Just died abruptly. And I don't believe that we cut back to his mother for some kind of closure or closing that storyline. I don't think we got a scene of that, and it just struck me as odd. Perhaps I missed it. I will be going back to watch the season again, so we'll see. But I just didn't feel as though his death meant as much as it was being built up to be, But definitely a surprise for me, Miguel's character and where his character went. I was not expecting it, and by the end, I would say I did like it. As I mentioned, the action sequences this season, and clearly the budget, they had a much bigger budget going into this season than they did the first. Sorry, I do believe they used it very, very well. And some of you saw it in the locations, you saw it in the choreography that was used. Some of the CGI wasn't perfect, like Lilith and her wings and so on. But again, they're working within their means as far as what budget they were given, and I don't think they would have been able to pull off much more with that. The interesting thing for me in particular, as far as the overarching story, was with Father Duretti, or I guess he's the Pope in this season. Duretti did die by the end, which again I was surprised by, and I'm loving that the series has been continuously surprising me. Father Duretti, in the first season, it's not as though he was an antagonist per se, but he was in opposition to some of the decisions that the OCS was actually making. And so you could see him as a somewhat of a villain in season 1, because he was against our characters in a lot of ways, and he's constantly whispering in the ear of one sister or another to get them to come over to his side. So in many ways you could have perceived him as a villain, but this season again did a complete flip on that, where he showed that he is an intelligent man, and he divisive, admittedly. When he first met our new character, I forget her name, the one from the New Order that was keeping watch of the crown. He was very dismissive of her, was dismissive of Adriel and everything that was happening, before him. I'm assuming, expecting that, if you deny, you deny, you deny. If you don't acknowledge it, then, it's not a threat. And unfortunately, that did not prove to be true. And it cost him in his life. But leading up to that, he became a somewhat likable character. And I think he was willing to, sacrifice himself there. He knew there was a risk. And he chose to stay behind. He could have easily have gone with Mother Superion and vanished, but decided to stay. So a lot of good character growth, I would say, this season. But again, I do wish I could have seen how some of these characters got to the place that we found them in season 2. There was connecting it to Doretti, and more so the scientist, and I'm blanking on her name, but the explanation that they gave this season in terms of how Adriel obtained his power, and how faith is can be seen as something that amounts from channeling focus, and that becomes energy of sorts, and that powers these entities in our plane or the next. And I thought that was a really, really good way to put it. Clearly this is going to be blasphemous to a lot of people. And it particularly brings to mind, I think there was a scene where Camila was saying, does that mean that Jesus was? And Ava immediately stopped her and said, let's just not go there. I think that was the writers just nodding to us and saying, yeah, we don't want to go too far in that direction because you're going to upset a lot of people. But they did as best as they could to kind of bridge the gap between science and knowledge, and I thought it was a really good explanation to kind of ground things a bit. And that can work in two ways, I'll get to the other. I thought that was really well done, but then there's some creative decisions that were made around that I didn't particularly love. But again, I'll get to that later. All right, now finally, the thing that we've all been waiting for, Ava and Beatrice. Interestingly, Ava and Beatrice, from the very first season, as I mentioned, not a huge fan of romance being the focus in any series. In season 1, when they did introduce the guy that she was traveling with, I thought, they didn't really have great chemistry. I felt both Ava and Beatrice had much better chemistry, and that is the reason why I didn't particularly mind that. This season, the creators, the writers appears to, have just leaned into it and said, okay, yeah, these characters are now really into each other. Now, from my perspective, and again, not someone who's typically into that stuff, I do feel as though the actresses do have great chemistry, so I love their relationship in this. I was worried for a bit at the moment when they, again, as I mentioned, when they introduced Miguel, because I didn't want this to become another love triangle. I like that they didn't drag this out. Even at the start they weren't really acknowledging their feelings toward each other, but eventually they got there by the end. So I'm glad that we've established that now, and we're dragging this out for 2 seasons of will they, won't they, for another season or 2. So I'm glad we got there. Now I do caution people because there is an inherent risk with this, and the reason I say this is because I'm not entirely sure that the writers intended for Beatrice and Ava to be a couple initially in season 1, and I'm always mindful whenever the writers decide to change course, because because of the response from fandom. There's good and bad that can come off that. And I would just really hate that they had a plan and they decided to change it purely because of fandom shipping these two characters. I have nothing against the two characters. I thought they had better chemistry in season 1 than the guy that she was with, but I just hope that this was something that was intended and not a reaction. I don't think it's good for writers to be reactionary, because then you're losing the sight of the story that you intended to tell in the first place. Overall, I love their scenes that they had together. That Beatrice continually became more and more protective of her. There was another scene in the cafe where Beatrice met this other young woman, and again I was like, oh, this is gonna become quadruple triangle or quadruple romance. Oh, I don't know, what do you call that now? Yeah, didn't want 4 people fighting. Didn't want, I guess, I didn't want another love triangle. Yeah. And it didn't. It was just a passing moment. I'm not sure if they intended to do more with it. We never went back to the girl. I guess it's just some I don't know. Was the scene necessary? I guess it was just to make Ava jealous, which, again, not for me, but it served its purpose, I suppose, to sort of nudge Ava in that direction. So yeah, all in all, I did love Ava and Beatrice's relationship this season. I thought it was really well done. I'm glad they didn't drag it out longer than was necessary. I'm again still just mindful, because I don't want the writers, essentially being reactive to just whatever the fandom wants, and then losing sight of their story. So hopefully that is not the case. But yes, all around, it was a great arc for that, for those two characters. Now, things that I thought could have been done better. Now, you've noticed I have not mentioned Lilith, right? Interestingly, Lilith was a favorite character of mine from season 1. I feel like all the sisters were, favorite characters of mine from season 1. Lilith was definitely up there, but it was quite obvious from the beginning that she was going to go to the dark side. Her name is Lilith. Now, if you've watched anything supernatural, or you've read certain materials, then you know what the name represents. So it was clear from the beginning that where she was going to be heading. At the end of the last season, I felt as though the writers didn't know what they wanted to do with the character. This season, I feel they nudged her in one clear direction, right? So it's like, okay, she's definitely not with the OCS anymore. She's still not clear what side she's on, but she doesn't want to be controlled anymore. But it did feel as though she was just trading one master for another, right? And I mean, she said that, okay, she didn't want to just follow orders, but she was essentially doing whatever Adriel told her to do. So I think Lilith still has some soul searching to do. And eventually I think she'll be a character who helps us in certain scenarios and maybe opposing us in others. I'm not sure what the end game will be for her, but I quite liked what they did with her this season. I just felt it could have been done differently, and this comes back to one of the things that I did not like and things that is missing from this season, which is Mary. And I'll speak a bit more in depth than that further down in the video, but as far as where Lilith is concerned, I felt as though that relationship that was built with Mary and Lilith, them being so close in season 1, and the back and forth between the two in season 1, it was one of the highlights of the first season, and I feel that would have been a better motivation for Lilith in this season if the fact that Mary dying, she blames the OCS for that, and then that is the reason why she goes to Adriel. Instead, they decided to go back to her mother and the reason they gave for her opposing her sisters is that, okay, yeah, she's still clinging to ownership of the halo. And that I felt was that taking a walk, a step or two backwards, because I felt, her parents, yes, they wanted her to be the halo bearer, but at this point, the world is ending. There's a cult taking over the place. It feels as though that is irrelevant at this point. And it was just really jarring when she went back home, and there was no one there. I don't know if this was a budget issue or just, again, COVID restrictions, but following Lilith around initially and in those early scenes, it just felt, okay, what's happening? Scenes felt empty. Her motivations weren't really making a whole lot of sense. So her mom saying, okay, yeah, I felt her mother should have given this speech at the end of last season, right? We didn't get a whole lot of her parents. I think we got glimpses of them, but not a lot of dialogue. I felt the conversation with her mother should have happened at the end of last season. It felt out of place in this season, and I didn't feel as though this was a good motivation for the character at this point where she is, especially with the time jump that we did. Why didn't she go home earlier? It just felt a bit out of place, and I thought the motivation for her going to the dark side probably should have been Mary, since they decided to kill Mary anyway. So that was one of the things that I just felt, okay, yeah, I like the direction they're taking Lilith, but I the execution wasn't really quite there. Moving on, Father Vincent. Vincent was and is an intriguing character that I like to watch. And again, this ties back to Mary, which I'll get back to that. The conversation that he had with Mary in the car on their way to, in season 1, on their way to find the map or something, and him explaining his past and his past sins, and that he was, I think, some form of gang member or something of the sort. But the fact that he saw that same, troubled persona in Mary, and he, for through the eyes of many of the others, it felt as though he favored Mary above the others, and he probably did, because he did see a lot of her in him, given his background. And then Mary, seeing him fight for the first, well, I don't think it's probably for the first time, but seeing him go all out and doing things that she didn't think he would have been capable of. I felt Mary had certain, I'll come back to Mary. Okay, I'll come back to Mary. It's kind of hard not to talk about her, because she was woven into so many of the storylines for the characters in season 1. She was kind of important to the story, but again, I'll come back to that. But yes, Father Vincent, great character to watch. I love the art that they gave him this season. I know some people would say, okay, why didn't they just kill Vincent? And they could have, but I don't really see any reason to. I think a lot of people were influenced by Adriel, and clearly Vincent was looking for something. He was misled, and a lot of bad things happened. But I think there's a lot more good to be done with him on our side, than to just kill him off. And I do like the actor. I think he's doing a really fantastic job with the role. Again, my only challenge with Vincent here is the execution, similar to Lilith, because I do feel, because they made such a strong connection with Mary and Vincent in the first season, I do feel Vincent's motivation should have been Mary's death. Again, perhaps it does push Lilith to the other side, but it should have also woken up Vincent on some level, because he was close to Mary, and perhaps her death is something that would awaken him and force him to look at things a bit differently, and then eventually a final push from the other characters and he comes back to our side. So I feel as though, if you're gonna kill Mary off, but she has such a strong connection to these two characters, you could have just utilized that to give a better explanation as to why these characters were doing the things that they did. But the reasoning for Vincent just jumping back to our side Um, from a few words from Mother Superion, it felt as though Mary was supposed to be giving those lines, and because the character is no longer there, then they had Mother Superion do it, because that kick to the knee, and taking him out to kill him, is something that Mary did in season 1 with one of the thugs that she was tracing down, and she wasn't going to shoot him initially, but she ended up doing it anyway. But that was something that Mary did in season 1. So when I saw the scene in season 2, it was clear that, okay, this was supposed to be a scene that Mary was supposed to be delivering, because there are a lot of parallels with what she did in season 1. And maybe that is what was Mary sparing him in that moment was going to change the character, and he comes back to our side. But if that wasn't working out, I would have preferred if they just, okay, Mary died, and that weight, he carried that weight with him, and that is what eventually awakens him, and he comes back to us. So again, love the character. I like what they do with the character, but the execution, I don't think, was quite there. And I do feel as though that was in part due to Mary as a character being missing for the season. Right. So now there were a few odd moments in this season, right? And I'm not sure how to even explain it, because again, as I mentioned, as much as I love Ava and Beatrice's relationship, there were some things throughout the season that just felt a bit out of place. We had that moment where, this is an example, where I think Ava and Beatrice were walking down the alley and they saw Miguel, and Ava was like, okay, he's acting suspicious. He's sneaking around. Looks like he's following someone. He's going down a dark alley. And she says, we should follow him. And then Beatrice says, no, it's okay. You go on. I'm like, what is happening here? Is this supposed to be a different scene? It didn't, like, why? She's going down. Clearly the guy is acting suspicious. I don't know if they were trying to say that, okay, maybe Ava just wants to follow him because she's attracted to him, whatever the case might be, but no, he's literally acting suspicious. He's following someone and going down a dark alley, and Beatrice just said, okay, sure, Ava, go on, go alone. She follows her afterwards, of course, but it was just a really odd. I'm not sure if it was something to do with the editing. And then Lilith, who initially tracked down Vincent, in trying to find Mary, and of course, we didn't actually. Well, again, more Mary talk. I'll come back to that. And Vincent takes her to a location, and then she turns her back to him. He locks the door, and the first thing that came to my mind is that you just saw her teleport behind you to kidnap you. Why would you think that this door, this gate, would stop her? And of course, Lilith proceeds to walk further in to fight the swarm of enemies coming at her, instead of just teleporting beyond the gate. So there are a few creative choices this season that just kind of took me out of the experience, and it just felt as though it was an odd choice to make. And there were a few of those that I'm not sure if this was a result of things happening during COVID or whatever the case might be, but there was definitely a few moments throughout the season where that just takes you out of it. Now, let's get back on track. Reya and Adriel, were they in this particular category for things I thought worked but could have been done better? Reya, let's start there. I don't have a whole lot to say on Reya, because we didn't get the character had very few lines. My only gripe is that I didn't think we need to see her, and I feel as though you're pulling the veil away from the viewer's eyes by just bringing her in, and it didn't seem like it was necessary. And there's a lot of it kind of revealed some of the weaknesses in the writing for this season, especially when Towards the end there, we see Reya being pulled through the portal. No explanation is given as to why she's at that location of the portal with demons surrounding her. Every time that we peek through the portal, we are seeing Reya. But from what Miguel said when he was teleported through last season, he was wandering in some barren land for a while before someone found him. So why is it every time we open this portal, Reya is standing right there? It doesn't make a lot of sense. And so I just didn't think they needed to go there. I think towards the end, they could have just had the portal there, and then the fight with Adriel, and we didn't need to see Reya. And we certainly didn't. And one of the things that I didn't particularly love is that, it by removing that veil, the character ceases to be ethereal and omnipotent and just feels just human. And it's one of the things that I was hoping, throughout the season when they did mention her, and then they showed us a glimpse when the doctor was speeding up the footage to see what was on the other side, and we saw that visage of her face looks like a brightly lit. It looked like some otherworldly being, and I thought, okay, great, leave it there. We don't need to see anything. We don't need to see more than that. Just leave the mystery intact. Don't go further. And so I was disappointed a bit towards the end when they just, let's just get Reya in here and she's just a human. It's just something for me. It's fine. Adriel is what he is. He's supposed to be some angel or whatever the case might be, but Reya is supposed to be something else, something far more powerful than he is. But for some odd reason, she could easily be taken down, and then towards the end, she was able to vanquish all these demons. It just added a layer of complexity that I don't think the writers fully thought through, and so it just exposed a bit more gaps in the writing than as was necessary. Reya. Love the initial character design that we saw when we looked through the portal. Didn't particularly love what they did towards the end by just, having her dragged through with no explanation as to why she's constantly at the portal, why she was weak 1 minute and then OP the next, and then just, giving her a human appearance when she's supposed to be this omnipotent being that is much more powerful than Gabriel. I suppose the idea is that with all the people worshipping Adriel, that he was somehow now as powerful as she is, because prayer and faith being channeled to him versus Reya. But I don't think I didn't get the impression that it was that many. Enough for him to become that powerful. And if it was, why would all that power just suddenly vanish? Especially when you consider that we don't see a whole lot of people praying to Reya because no one knows who Reya is. So her power, is it coming from the same place? It raises more questions than it does give answers. And I just don't think the writers needed to do that. They could have just as easily had the fight in front of the portal with them trying to stop Adriel from crossing over, and then that would have been it. Now on to Adriel. I kept trying to figure out whether they recast the actor because he looks so different than he does in season 1, although it's been a minute since I've seen season 1, so that could possibly be why. But overall, he gave a good performance. Actually, I'm trying to remember why I have him in this category. He gave a pretty good performance. He did, I guess, because he did the typical mustache twirling villain things, where he would just let the characters live, for no other reason than okay, sure. He's had several opportunities to kill Ava, and it was just okay. Not today. Not today. We'll fight another day. Another day when I'll for sure lose. So there were a few things. um, overall, I thought Adriel, as a villain, was pretty decent. I much enjoy him as a villain more when he's in the shadows, manipulating the other characters to do his bidding, than when he is at the forefront. I didn't enjoy the action sequence at the end, but as I mentioned, I much prefer whenever he's working in the background and one step ahead of everyone, showing that he's much more intelligent than I do when he's focused in the focus of attention in combat, because I felt as though he is hyped up to be a lot more powerful than he appears to be when you do see him actually fight. Even though we saw Ava doing some training, I don't think she should be on par with Adriel. And I think the battle in the end really should have been a group fight, even though the others aren't supernatural. But it raises more questions than it does give you answers, especially where the halo is concerned. We do know he feared the crown because that's apparently what trapped him, but okay, fine. What's up with the halo? Why did you steal it in the first place? Why didn't you kill Eva and take it when you've had multiple chances to do that? So a lot of questions that I don't believe are answers. I'm not sure if this is the last we've seen of him. He did say he can't be killed in this plane. So perhaps he was taken back. Doesn't appear that way. At least they didn't use the portal. Looks like he was ripped apart, but maybe he was taken back to his realm. So we could see him another time. But what does that mean for Eva and the halo? So yeah, decent villain. Prefer when he's being manipulative and outsmarting his opponents, not so much the actual power scaling for his character. We still didn't get a whole lot on his background as to he kept trying to portray himself as the savior of this world, and he did plant a few seeds as far as some holy battle and Earth being a battleground. I'm not sure why anyone would want to come here. But apparently, and he's saying if he doesn't succeed, then Eva needs to to stop Reya in his place. So again, more questions than we did get answers. I don't know if that's the direction that we're going in. I'm curious to see where the writers actually go from here, but yeah, I think as a villain, Adriel did decently well. Things that I did not particularly love. All right, I've been mentioning it here and there throughout the entirety of the discussion, and that is, where is Mary? Where is Mary? As I mentioned, throughout that, the character was so integral to season 1. She was the reason why Eva came back and decided to join the fight in the end, because Mary showed her why their work was important. She went on the mission with Vincent, and that was when it was revealed to us Vincent's past, why he has such a close connection to Mary, because he also comes from a troubled past. And seeing their dynamic, I think he made a lot of exceptions for her, especially with her not really performing her non duties, but him making exceptions for her because he saw so much of himself in her, and so I felt we lost a lot of that coming in for some of these characters, because as I mentioned, you feel as though that conversation that happened between Mother Superion and Father Vincent, you feel as though that should have been Mary, because we saw Mary do that with another guy in season 1. That one she killed, but Mother Superion spared Vincent here. But I feel as though that was supposed to be Mary, and she would have spared Vincent, and that would have felt a bit more earned, with him, especially with him coming back, because he has history with Mary. The same thing that happened with Lilith. They had a lot of screen time together in the very first season, and they talked a lot about how close they were with Shannon, but that they were close together and they were always competing against each other. And those are some of the highlights from season 1. So to see Lilith here absent Mary, and Mary doesn't mention it at all outside of the very first few episodes where she's trying, or episode 1 really, where she's trying to find Mary and doesn't, and then she lets it go and never talks about it again afterwards. It was like, okay, this is just a meager explanation as to why Mary is not here, and then that's it. Lilith, who grew up together with her, has now forgotten about her, and again, Mary's absence would have been perfect leverage for Lilith to go to the darker side, or to come back to help us, whatever the case might be. She was woven into the story in such a way in season 1 that you notice her absence here because she was so closely knit with a lot of other characters. Same thing with Ava. Her being the one to bring Ava back in the last season. They also had a lot of screen time together, and it's like, okay, Ava's who's Mary? I have a new friend now. So you do notice her absence because she was such a huge part of the story, and I'm not clear on why the character didn't return for this season. Perhaps scheduling conflict, or things happen in production. Maybe she decided to leave the project for something else, whatever the case might be. But the absence is notable, and I don't believe they explained it as best as they could in the season. It also wasn't definitive. They didn't show her dying. They just showed her at the end of the season being swarmed by some of Adriel's followers. But it still felt as though they were saying, okay, we're leaving this open in the event we want to bring her back. I do hope that is the case, because I think she was a great character in season 1. But then again, they introduced another character. Okay, here's another black character. Is she Mary enough for you? It was weird. And don't get me wrong, that the new nuns that they brought in, they were great. Their action sequences were fantastic, especially the young woman, the other black character. There aren't that many in this series. They did a fantastic job, but Mary had purpose in season 1, and I felt these were just there to kick some ass, and that was it. And the one that I forgot to mention, Mother Superion, because she had such a tumultuous relationship with Mary. They never agreed on much. Mary didn't really follow all the guidelines that sisters are supposed to follow. And it would have just been such amazing growth for those characters to see her and Mother Superion, especially Mother Superion, passing away, to see how that affected Mary. Missed opportunities, man. And that's the thing that was just immediately noticeable, because she had so many connections to all these characters, and then she was just not there. I'm gonna give the writers the benefit of the doubt and say, maybe this was something that they couldn't work around, and they did the best that they could under the circumstances. It felt as though it was something abrupt, with her having no scenes at all. It felt as though it was something really abrupt. Don't know what that is. And maybe they just did the best they could to try to, right the ship. All right. Again, just giving them the benefit of the doubt. I do hope whatever it is that happened, that it can be resolved later on and the character can be brought back. They did leave it a bit open, even though they said yes, Mary is gone. But I think if they wanted to kill her off in the last season, they really easily could have just showed her dying, because there was a moment there at the end of season 1 where Adriel could have just killed her. So the fact that they're still kind of, okay, Mary's gone, I think they're saying, okay, if she doesn't come back, okay, the character died, but if she does come back, there's a way to bring her back. So I'm hopeful that there is an opportunity for her to come back. Yeah. All right. Now, the other thing that I took issue with this season is the characters splitting up. Um, it felt as though we missed something that happened between season 1 and season 2. Again, not sure if that had anything to do with Mary's character or actor having to leave the project. But one of my criticisms of the last season was that I'm not a huge fan of the chosen one trope, and I think the show works best when all the characters are together and working together. And then at the end of last season, we finally had everyone together. And then at the start of this season, everyone was off doing their own thing, and we didn't know why or how. Why did Lilith go off on her own? And everyone, we were just split. Immediately, I did not love that because, as I mentioned, and I said in my review in season 1, I love these characters when they're together, their interaction with each other. And we still got that because they kind of paired everyone off together, Camila and Moses Superion, and Beatrice and Ava. So they did a lot of pairings, and I liked it, so I'll say that they still gave that to us on some level. I just preferred when the characters were together as a group, and eventually we worked our way back to that. I just hope that we stay that way, at least for a while in the next season. I hope so. But yeah, just for, I would say, it was a pretty solid second season. Typically, shows don't get better with each season. The quality tends to, deteriorate over time. And I think perhaps I said it in my review for season 1 that, I do think this story is about, maybe 4 seasons. I wouldn't go beyond that. But, Netflix, if something doesn't perform, they cancel it. If it does well, they want 100 seasons. They need to find a balance, I do hope the writers are, at the very least, they have a story that they want to tell, and which is one of the reasons why I mentioned earlier that, I'm concerned about them being reactionary and just changing things just because the fandom wants something specifically to happen. Because if you're willing to do that for the fans, and if Netflix says we want 10 seasons, then they're going to give them 10 seasons. I want the writers to have a plan in place, a structure for the story, already written out. And, they have to be flexible, of course, but I think if this drags on for far too long, then it will just ruin the integrity of what they've done so far, and that would just be a shame, and that would just be a shame for me. But overall, I thought this was a pretty solid second season. I would say I still enjoyed season 1 a bit more. Again, kind of hard to love it more than season 1 when Mary is missing. She was a highlight character for the first season. So season 1 is still the better of the two in my personal opinion. I'm still hopeful to see what happens in season 3. As for the overarching story, where do we go from here? Adriel is, for all intents and purposes, dead. I don't believe Ava is dead. There was a scene at the end there where the sword started to glow, which I'm assuming is suggesting that, okay, she came back. What happened with her time on the other side? I guess that's for the new season. Are we going to be focusing on this war that Adriel spoke about, and who's this war happening with? Who are we fighting with exactly? Are we going to learn more about Reya? Please, God, let's not learn more about Reya. I don't know. I wanted, in the way that Lilith was perceived in this season, she looked demonic. I would expect the opposite to happen with a character like Reya, and that's one of the things that just didn't really feel that just didn't fit right with me. These otherworldly beings just looking like regular people, especially when we have these other creature designs that they've shown that looked so amazing. You know, why is Reya just a random person? But you know, we'll see. We'll see. I'm not sure where they're going to take the story from here. Beatrice has now left. But I'm assuming once Ava comes back, she'll be back in the fold. Maybe not as a, you know, a member of the OCS anymore. And that was such a weird moment when she was leaving. It's like, okay, someone else will have to train these guys, and then she just walks out and leaves. No goodbyes to anyone. Yeah, add that to the list of just odd moments this season. But again, a lot of the issues that I do see with the series, I attribute to, you know, a lot of the production happening around COVID. And so I expected to see some flaws here and there as a result of that. And I think a lot of shows really suffered from that. So hopefully, you know, we're not quite out of COVID yet. But, you know, hopefully conditions are much fairer than they were the last season. So, you know, the writers can kind of get back on track with that. And hopefully Mary will be able to make a return. Father Vincent is back at the OCS. Hopefully, you know, don't turn again. You know, yeah, don't flip on us again. They didn't tell us who the new pope is. Is that, you know, someone that could potentially come in and disrupt things at the OCS? Because as much as Duretti was, you know, a divisive figure, he was very much for the OCS. But, you know, what if someone who's truly against it comes in and says, okay, you know, I'm disbanding the OCS? So yeah, you know, who's taking over for Duretti? You know, what's the state of the world now that Adriel, even though he's now gone, you know, the world now has proof that these things do exist. They saw Ava, they saw Adriel. You know, so what now becomes of the world? What becomes of the believers? Whether it's, you know, Adriel's believers or those, you know, for God. You know, so, you know, there are a lot of things that they can really, you know, play on in the next season, for these stories. Again, I'm mostly interested in the characters. You know, so as we didn't lose any of our sisters really. Lilith is still off somewhere. You know, she says preparing for the battle to come, and hopefully they're on the same side. The only person that we supposedly lost was Ava, which, you know, I don't think is permanent. Most likely temporary. There was an interesting thing that happened at the end there where she asked Beatrice to take the halo. For a second there, I was I would have been happy because you know, Ava's character arc, as I mentioned, I'm not a huge fan of chosen one characters, which is why I prefer the ensemble group here. And Ava as a character, and I don't feel she's, you know, we're doing time skips, but I'm not sure her character is actually learning and growing. And funnily enough, you know, it came up in a conversation between Ava and Beatrice. You know, she's saying, okay, you know, are you sorry? Because it would suggest that you have regret, you know, but you keep making the same mistakes. And each time she would say she has learned, she doesn't. You know, there was that scene when they did the heist and she was kidnapped by Father Vincent. She came to, and instead of going back to check on her sisters, she decides to run off with Miguel. So, again, I'm attributing a lot of this to, you know, the quality of the writing suffering because of COVID, maybe, you know, and things happening in production. Yeah. I'm gonna give it to that. But yeah, I would not be opposed to the idea of Beatrice becoming the new warrior nun or someone else for that matter. I really have no attachments to Ava. I know, you know, I enjoyed her character being, you know, different and disruptive in the first season. And you know, okay, she's not one of the nuns, so different personality and so on. I liked it. Okay, it's kind of growing old now, because the character is not learning from anything from any of her experiences, and that's where, you know, I have a bit of trouble with the character. But you know, who knows? You know, I think if they were going to kill her off, they would have just shown it. So clearly, once she has gone to. But will she age? You know, if she went through the portal. Will it be a Michael situation where she comes back, but she comes back as a different actress, an older actress? I don't know. I don't think they'll do that, but there'll need to be some explanation as to why, because time passes differently over there. So they need to explain that to us. But yes, overall strong season. Love all the characters. Ava still not necessarily my favorite. My favorite character this season is still gonna be Beatrice. Yeah, it still has to be Beatrice, and then a close second is probably Mother Superion and Camila. I thought they were great. This is fantastic highlights this season. I love that they got more screen time because I thought they were great. Just as far as the story goes, I think they managed to wrap this up as a season, a self-contained season in and of itself, and they've laid the foundation for other potential stories. Again, as I've mentioned, I'm always wary of series running longer than necessary, and I do hope that the writers, have a roadmap as to where they want these characters to go and where they want the story to end. End on a high note. Drag the season out to several seasons. I think 4 seasons is a good mark for this series, based on what they revealed to us so far. And I'm looking forward to the next season. Alright guys, be sure to post down below. Let me know what your thoughts are on the Warrior Nun season 2. Remember to hit the like and subscribe button if you want to support the channel, and I will see you for the next one.